Growing up, the Halloween season was the time of year I looked forward to the most. And joke's on you. It's still the time of year I look forward to the most. I absolutely love Halloween. When I was a kid, it was mostly about the candy, but now as an adult with a 401k and tummy issues, I just like it for the general feeling in the air every October. The leaves changing color, the decorations, and, of course, the horror movies on TV. Now, as a kid, October signaled a change on the airwaves as the channels I would watch on TV became spookified, showing more Halloween-centric fare. The first video I ever uploaded on this channel was covering one of those Halloween treats. R.L. Stein's The Haunting Hour. Don't think about it. But alongside that, Cartoon Network, my favorite channel, would show things like Goosebumps and spooky episodes of the cartoons at the time, like The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Well, there is a lot I could say about that era of TV, and maybe I will someday. I want to talk about a movie that was a yearly event in my childhood, one that I still watch on occasion now, usually after a few drinks when I remember it exists. I want to talk about Scary Godmother's Halloween Spooktacular. This is a weird fucking movie. I'm both haunted and entranced by the shockingly bad CGI, which has aged worse than a carton of milk left out for a decade too long. And the story is almost non-existent, taking 40 minutes to literally say and achieve nothing. But somehow, in some weird way, I don't hate the movie. Call it nostalgia, which is probably what it is, but behind the layers of reused animation and royalty-free music, there's a surprising amount of heart in the Halloween Spooktacular. Seeing as it is now the Halloween season, and how I have nothing better to do, we are going to journey back to the year 2003 and look back at Scary Godmother's Halloween Spooktacular, a spooky, scary monster mash of a movie. Welcome back to Victim of Nostalgia, the show where I re-examine media from my childhood and see if it truly held up to the test of time, or if my memories were just twisted by the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia. Let's talk about Scary Godmother. So I didn't actually know this until like a few months ago when I started toying around with the idea of making this video, but apparently Scary Godmother is based off a comic book series, which I had never heard of. Created by Jill Thomas in the late 90s, the books center around a young girl named Hannah Marie who is afraid of monsters, and the titular Scary Godmother, like a spooky fairy godmother, who lives on the quote-unquote fright side, which I can only imagine is a different dimension where things are spooky, but the movie wasn't exactly clear about that. In 2001, the first book in the series was adapted for the stage by a community theater in Chicago, and from that adaptation, the movie was born. Produced in Canada by Mainframe Entertainment, who had a history of CGI animation as one of the companies behind the show Reboot, the film made its debut at Comic-Con 2003 before going straight to DVD, as all quality movies do. And then, the following year, it came to Cartoon Network, just in time for Halloween. Now, a little bit of my history with the movie before we fully dive in. I don't remember how old I was when I first saw the movie. I don't think it was the first time it aired because I would have been 4 years old at the time, and my memories from that period of my life tend to be pretty hazy. But I do remember the film being annually broadcast on Cartoon Network, and I definitely watched it several times throughout my childhood. What's weird is that I don't remember watching it ever again until I was in college, when I remember that it existed and I put it on for my college roommates. And that was probably after a few drinks. Listen, I have a weird brain and alcohol makes me nostalgic. Anyway, since that point, it's become a yearly Halloween staple for me. But enough about me, let's take a trip to the fright side and talk about the movie. This is where I want to put a spoiler warning, but honestly, if you're watching this, you probably saw the movie as a kid and you're just here for nostalgia purposes. So anyway, let's go. The movie opens on Halloween night, as all good Halloween movies do. I mean, it's in the name. If the movie opened on October 30th, I would be mad. We're introduced to some of our supporting characters, Katie, Daryl, and Bert, dressed as a cat, a piece of candy, and, I quote, a baseball player driving an SUV. A little bit overkill, but whatever. We then meet Jimmy, the de facto leader of this gang of youths, who is being forced to take his little cousin Hannah Marie trick-or-treating, and he is not pleased about it. Listen, I never had younger siblings, so I can't say I understand how Jimmy is feeling, but I can say that what they do next feels borderline criminal and probably should have resulted in juvie for at least Jimmy for the mental trauma he's about to cause. But before we get to that, we need to talk about the character design quickly though, because I have a few questions. So one by one, we are introduced to the characters. Katie, Daryl, and Bert all have a fairly distinct appearance choice in common. And no, it's not just the terrifying CGI, it's the fact that they all have these little black holes for eyes. Like, okay, it's a style choice, whatever. Then we see Jimmy, and he also has those same distinct eyes. It's giving Coraline vibes, like several years before the movie came out. And by this point, I was ready to accept their style choice and just live with it. But then we meet our protagonist, Hannah Marie, and she has fully illustrated eyes. So what the hell gives? Listen, I know this is a fairly cheap, short TV special, but like, come on, some consistency would be nice at least. I'm a man of journalistic integrity, so I did a little bit of research. In an interview with Mainframe Entertainment from Computer Graphics World in 2003, the company actually touched on the visual appearance of the film, talking about how it was originally supposed to be a 2D movie animated in a watercolor style, like the comics, but then the creator, Jill Thomas, decided she'd rather have the special be 3D due to her love of movies like The Nightmare Before Christmas, which I can actually see a lot of influence from. They also talked in the interview about the speed at which specials like these are produced, especially during a time when they were being made for TV so fast, which I think is why it ended up looking the way it did, but that's just pure speculation on my part. Anyways, back to the psychological torment. Jimmy has the brilliant idea to try and scare Hannah, because taking out your frustration on others is always a good choice. That was the lesson of this movie, right? Anyway, Jimmy tells Hannah that every year they need to leave candy at the quote-unquote spook house, a creepy old house that is just in a graveyard, I guess. Because if they don't, the monsters who live there will eat children instead. I know, terrifying. So, the 4 older kids send Hannah inside with a king-size chocolate bar to feed the monsters, and then they lock her in there. Something that would inflict a lifetime of traumatic memories, probably. I feel like everyone has that traumatic memory, right? Some vague traumatic thing that happened in their childhood. For me, it was when I got knocked over on a trampoline with like 7 other people on it, and they all kept jumping and I got jumped on a bunch. No? Just me? Alright then. Hannah is freaking the fuck out, and rightfully so, having an absolute breakdown, and it's now that we are introduced to the titular Scary Godmother, who appears before Hannah with her ghost cat, once again hearkening back to Nightmare Before Christmas. And she tells her to not be afraid, and then fucking kidnaps her. Listen, under other circumstances, this would be a very different movie, but it is a kid's movie, and that means it's okay to talk to weird people in the spook house. The Scary Godmother invites Hannah to her Halloween party at her house with her quote-unquote broom mates, a joke that I'm sure won't get old throughout the course of this film. The pair fly off on a broomstick and make their way to the quote-unquote fright side, which appears to just be a portal in the spooky clouds. Which begs the question, if a plane flies into a spooky cloud, would they get taken to the fright side? Is there like an entire deeper lore to the fright side about random people getting trapped there after their plane goes missing? Is Amelia Earhart in the fright side? All questions that will never be answered by this movie. Now, something you'll notice a lot in the movie, though, is that they love to reuse animation and music. You'll see so many of the same exact shots repeated to pad time throughout the movie, and even more times you'll hear the same exact song, which is just playing in the background right now. It sounds royalty-free, but it's basically the de facto theme for this movie. Something about this movie that you need to know, though, is that it really likes to beat you over the head with the message. So, for like the next 30 minutes, we are hit with scene after scene of Hannah being afraid of monsters, learning they aren't bad, and then being their friend. It's a fine message for kids to help them not be afraid of monsters under the bed, so I don't want to knock it, but it does get a little old. In most of my recent watchings of the movie, This is around where the alcohol sets in. So, at the Scary Godmother's home, we are introduced to the first of her broom mates, the fabulously flamboyant Mr. Scully Pettibone. He's a gay skeleton. That's his character.
Oh my, Scary Godmother! Sorry to be so late, but I just had to get these old bones bleached for the party.
When I tell people about this movie, I typically introduce it as a movie with a gay skeleton. And they don't believe me. And then we watch it and they're like, oh shit, you're right, he is gay. And if you don't believe me, they literally introduce him when he comes out of the closet. And they use the fabulous double entendre of,
"This is Mr. Pettibone. He's our official skeleton in the closet."
Which is just, mwah, chef's kiss for a kid's movie. Scully is hands down my favorite character, and he kind of serves as the comic relief for the film, cracking wise as the situations unfold. Granted, he doesn't have much to work with since the same situations keep happening over and over again, but he does his best. After Scully comes out of the closet, sorry, I couldn't help myself, I'll stop now, we are then introduced to other characters, such as Harry the werewolf. The movie loves its puns, even if they are bad ones. Harry is basically the antagonist of this movie in lieu of Jimmy, who is still in the normal world because he's not cool enough to go to the fright side. Harry's foibles include eating all the food at the party and just generally being a nuisance. He's basically that friend that no one invited to the party, but they still show up anyway and they ruin things. Don't tell anyone, but I have a theory that Scully and Harry are in an odd couple-esque relationship, and that they kind of balance out each other's eccentricities. Fuck, that's a long word. Eccentricities. It's kind of perfect if you think about it. Throughout the film, we cut back to Jimmy and his friends outside the spook house, who are literally just sitting out there in a graveyard being like, what the hell do we do now? They're literally wasting their Halloweens after trapping a young girl in a scary house. Jimmy's friends start to realize maybe they did a bad thing, but of course we still have like half the runtime left, so they aren't going to be going into the spook house to find Hannah for a while. Back on the fright side, though, we meet more of the party guests. Count Max, Countess Ruby, and their son Orson, a family of vampires, who are genuinely the scariest part of this movie. Like, they seem nice and all, but they look scary as hell, and this is only accentuated by the bad CGI. I gotta be honest, design-wise, I get that Count Max looks like Nosferatu, but I don't understand the name choices here. As a kid, I always thought it was a reference to Max and Ruby, the titular characters from their own books, which came out about a decade before the first Scary Godmother comic, but that doesn't really make much sense in any way. Orson could be a reference to famous actor and director Orson Welles, but that doesn't really make much sense either. I'm definitely overthinking this, but in a world where they have gone out of their way to have puns for names so far, these three just kind of stick out like sore thumbs. If anyone knows why they're named this way, please let me know in the comments. With the introduction of the three vampires, though, and of course, following vampire logic, they're welcoming to the house, we are introduced to a new dynamic as well between Hannah and Orson, who seem to have crushes on each other. And, at least according to the Scary Godmother wiki, which exists and I took the time to peruse, Orson does in fact have a crush on Hannah, which I assume is explored more in the comics, but I really don't have time to read those right now. I have a to-read pile that's like a mile high, and sadly, this isn't my top priority. So, the wiki will have to suffice. I gotta be honest, at this point in the movie, there ain't shit happening. Like, seriously, this entire movie has just been introducing characters with little to no consequence. And I could see why something like this would work really well for a short comic book. The events and the premise of this movie just don't really compel much emotion, though, because they're introducing so many characters, and by the time you finally meet them all, the movie's over. But I digress. We have some tension to address in the movie. While Hannah's meeting the vampire trio, in the kitchen, everyone's favorite character, Harry, is eating literally all the food, something I kinda mentioned earlier, but now it's actually happening. Scully tries to stop him, but alas, it is too late, the damage has been done. Luckily, Count Max is able to hypnotize Harry and knock him out for a good while. But now we have a problem. What will they eat at the party? But before we tackle that debacle, we have to meet the Scary Godmother's final broommate, Bugaboo, who lives in the basement because he's literally the monster that hides under your bed. Bugaboo scares Hannah more than any other creature of the night she has been introduced to so far, and a lengthy chase sequence ensues, which everyone gets involved with, and I'm not really sure why, but I'm not gonna question it. Eventually, the dust settles, and Hannah decides that Bugaboo isn't that bad, so finally the party can really commence. We then get a long-ass spooky dance scene set to the same music we heard earlier in the special. The budget was a little bit limited in this thing. After that, we see other various party games like Dress Up Harry, who is still hypnotized, and Pictionary, because even monsters know how to throw down. Remember what I said about how jack shit happens in this movie? Yeah, they're really stretching for runtime here. We also cut back to Jimmy and the gang, who are still outside debating whether or not to go in and get Hannah. In universe, it's been like 2 hours, and Halloween is basically over, and they're still discussing this. It's absolute insanity. Like, they're potentially permanently damaging this young girl's psyche, but they are too busy discussing the pros and cons of rescuing her. Anyway, back to what really matters. The party, which Scary Godmother says is quote-unquote just getting started, even though it's been going on for what seems like an eternity. And we get to go back to that little debacle from earlier. They're completely out of food because Harry ate it all. And now they need a fast, easy solution that can appeal to everyone. And what is that solution? Pizza, of course. Now, my go-to pizza order is pepperoni, pineapple, and olive. But the monsters have some other things in mind, like blood pizza, which I don't really understand conceptually, but whatever. Vampires gotta eat, I guess, and they can't have extra garlic in their sauce. If a human eats garlic and then the vampire sucks their blood, does that, kill them? Is that, poison? That's not even in the script. That's just a genuine thought I was having. It's here that we learn that Hannah and Bugaboo both like the same kind of pizza, with cheese and olives on it. A pretty solid choice that I actually ate a lot during my vegetarian phase in college. So I can't fault Bugaboo for that one.
I thought monsters ate little girls.
Oh, that's silly. Little girls make the crust all soggy.
I also agree with his point that he doesn't put little girls on pizza because it makes the pizza all soggy. So I also don't put little girls on my pizza. But if I did, I would be on several government lists. Back outside the Fright Side, Jimmy and the gang are still fucking around. And though the gang is starting to think they should go in and get Hannah, Jimmy is still in full asshole mode, declaring himself the leader and saying that they will wait longer. Again, none of this has any consequence. It all just kind of happens and then it's over with. Thankfully, we are getting close to the climax of the movie. So back on the Fright Side, they get their pizza and party some more, and Hannah talks about how she ended up alone in the spooky house on Halloween night, blaming it all on Jimmy. But guess what? Bugaboo says that he scares Jimmy every other Thursday, and he's really upset that Jimmy is spreading lies about him, saying that he eats little girls. So, the monsters decide to get revenge on Jimmy and the gang by giving them the scare of a lifetime. Now, this is a kids' movie, and usually kids' movies feel obligated to have some kind of moral, but this one really doesn't. Scary Godmother taught me that if people prank me or bully me, I should get revenge by any means necessary. I don't know if that's the right takeaway, but that is my takeaway. Back in the normal world, Jimmy and the gang finally enter the spook house, where they get the shit scared out of them by the monsters. And in the end, it's up to Hannah to quote-unquote scare them away, saving them. But really, if I were to do this, I would make it seem like the monsters killed me, and then I'd force Jimmy to go back and explain what happened. Like, imagine the repercussions for bullying a girl resulting in her death. Dude would suffer a life of mental anguish and torment. Maybe I shouldn't make kids' movies. Anyway, as the movie comes to its end, and the bullies are scared out of the home, the Scary Godmother gives Hannah a skeleton key, so she can visit whenever she wants to. So that's Scary Godmother's Halloween Spooktacular. And is it good? Well, it's a loaded question. In part, it lives up to my fond memories from my childhood, but I wouldn't say that makes it a good movie. Nothing really happens in the movie, actually, and the CGI has not aged well, and there really is just no point to watch it. But at the same time, I feel like the movie has a good heart to it, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's the perfect kind of inoffensive movie you can put on and no one will stop you, you know? So, if you need a spooky movie to show your kids this Halloween, or you just want to relive some memories, then the Halloween Spooktacular isn't the worst choice. Thank you so much for watching. Wait a minute. I need to tell you something. I have lied to you. Well, maybe lied isn't the best word. I withheld information from you. That seems near the mark. You see, 2 years after the Halloween Spooktacular was made, there was another movie that came out. One which I don't remember quite as fondly. In fact, I don't remember it at all, and I didn't know it existed until someone had uploaded it to YouTube. I'm talking about the Scary Godmother 2, Electric Boogaloo. Wait, that's not right. It's Scary Godmother 2, The Revenge of Jimmy. But Electric Boogaloo is a better subtitle because it has boo in it. But I digress. Since it's not Halloween yet and I still have nothing better to do, I guess I'll have to review The Revenge of Jimmy 2. But you'll have to wait for that because that review is coming out on Halloween. The spookiest day of the year. Ooh. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. My script means nothing to me. Now for real this time. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. If you want to find me live, I stream a few times a week over at twitch.tv/AndyDoesThings. Now, goodbye and good fright. I'll see you all on Halloween for a sequel video, baby. Mic drop?